Well. Here we are again. Now, as you might have noticed, I have put this video specifically on my extra channel because I am not a fan of, being a part of YouTube drama or anything like that. Like, the last time I talked about Metazoo was about as dramatic as I'd like to get, thank you very much. Um, and, so let's just cut to the quick. Earlier today, to my understanding, the at 2:35 p.m., according to the screenshot I have here, Metazoo has officially closed their door. They've taken their ball and gone home. It's over. It did not make it to its third birthday. So to start off with, Metazoo, it's a game that I covered. They actually did a couple of ad buys on my on some of my videos. One of the big things about Metazoo was I actually did like some consultation for them while they were still getting things going, doing their Kickstarter, starting to see the hype, things like that. Mike Waddell, I think is his name, or is it Waddle? I can't, I'm not sure. We never actually met in person. We attempted several times, but we never actually made it. But we did actually talk a lot on Discord. So, I can tell you a fair amount about the early days of Metazoo, but when it comes to what's happened recently, I am kind of in the dark, because after I did that video where I said, with a nice big drama bait title, "Friendship Ended with Metazoo," they basically blocked me on all of their social media, which, fair enough. Can't really fault them for doing that one bit. You can't have somebody saying stuff about that like you and continue to entertain them. Um, but here's the thing: is Mike and I have actually been talking a lot about like the NFTs and all that in private long before I made that video. So, yeah, Metazoo has ended, and the thing is, this kind of comes out of the blue. Because here's the thing: is Metazoo was doing really well. They were like this big Kickstarter success story. They started at like just a $10,000 like Kickstarter thing that has since transformed into like one of the biggest indie card games ever made. It was absolutely one of the big provocateurs of the bubble era. It was being sold in Target and Barnes and Noble as recently as like a month ago. I still saw their cards on shelves for ages, and now suddenly out of the blue, it's over. Um, Comes with a bit of a shock, because if you're selling at like Target and stuff like that, you're getting in the money. It's not like the Flood era where there were like a bajillion card games on the shelf. No, there's only like pretty much like the big three plus Dragon Ball plus whatever one or two things are lucky enough to get on there. To go from that to bust is, it's concerning. Like I said, I was banished from all of their social media for a long time, so a lot of what I'm going to go over is stuff that trickled down through the grapevine as to why this happened, because to people who followed Metazoo more closely, apparently this was less of a surprise. So the premise, Metazoo, it is a card game that is based on cryptids. Cryptids, the easy way to explain it, are like modern day fairy tale creatures. Things like the Mothman and Bigfoot are considered cryptids. I don't know if Godzilla would be considered a cryptid. Well, Godzilla's technically a fictional character. There have been like sightings of Godzilla, but there have been sightings of Nessie. Nessie's considered a cryptid. But the idea was that they made like a card game that used like the throwback like Ken Sugimori watercolor Pokemon art style, to make sort of a game that was kind of charming, and it was really quirky because you had cards that actually like involved your surroundings in order to play them. Like, there were, here's one. Gingerbread Man was a card that you could only play during the month of December, but he could be used to heal your Santa Claus card, which could also only be played on December, back up to full. There were some that involved wearing pants. There were some that involved like whether it was daytime or nighttime. It was designed to be quirky. It played like a Pro ZD video. And in fact, in my review of Metazoo, that was kind of the thing. I deliberately made a video that was designed to look like a ProZD video. I'm willing to admit that ProZD is what gave me the idea. But the crazy part is like 90% of that was actual gameplay. In that thing I did. The only thing that I think was fake was what was it? The Piazza bird saying that it had gave it like a candlelit dinner one night. That wasn't really the same. Piazza bird responds to the sight of an open flame. But you know, it was a quirky, like, fun idea. A lot of like celebration of Americana, the fun of, you know, cryptids and stuff like that. I've looked into cryptids on occasion. I like the sense of adventure that comes with them. The idea that there's still wonderful things to discover in this world of ours. I like that. I think a lot of people gravitated to that, but then Rudy got a box. Rudy, also known as Alpha Investments, is this kind of infamous figure in the trading card game scene. He is absolutely probably the biggest catalyst behind this whole TCG bubble. A lot of people say it was Logan Paul. Logan Paul, I think, was just part of it because Rudy of Alpha Investments, he like actively goes around and like he does, you know, like drama pieces and hit pieces. He says, "Oh, this game is dead. Oh, this game is plummeting." Like, almost to the point where it feels like he's trying to manipulate the market when doing this. There's a reason why I make a joke in my player taxonomy page when I introduced the concept of the Jimothy. The joke was that I was originally going to call him the Rudy. But that's the thing. He was sent a promotional box similar to the one I was sent. And that's when people started, you know, like buying up all the first editions and stuff and going nuts. And Mike and I were in contact before that happened and as that happened. And he was talking about, you know, he was feeling anxious about it. And my advice to him actually was, let it happen. I know that might sound a little awkward coming from me, but I don't believe in like that artists should suffer for their work. No, if you make something, if you try to sell something that you've made, there's no shame in wanting to get paid for that. Honestly, it's one of the biggest negative stigmas I see about the art world is that you have to suffer for your art. Heck no. If you can make money at something you've made, that's awesome. That's kind of the dream. Because like it or not, we live in a society. So I said, yeah, let the first edition, let it go to the moon. Let it become something special, but follow that up with a sincere product that gets people excited, gets them happy, is accessible, and encourages sort of a neat change in the game space. And for a while that looked like that's what was happening. Like the very first set was like, it released in October, it had all sorts of spooky monsters, you know, it was really cool. And, you know, we were like brainstorming ideas, like maybe there should be like special t-shirts or buttons that allow people who show up to like apply a condition. Like you could wear a button that says it's my birthday, or you could wear a button that says it's Christmas, and for game purposes it counts as that. The terrain cards did that a bit. I think they started doing special terrain cards. Like the special terrain cards that have like abilities beyond just being terrain were my idea. Like one of the things I proposed was actually one called Haunted Hayride, which is both a farm, but also makes it October. I don't know if they ever made Haunted Hayride. They made some special terrain, some special things like that. But Metazoo is an example of how you can take a good opportunity like the one presented to Mike Waddle and drive it into the ground. I actually, like I said, I've heard most of this through the grapevine, but I do have like a physical list that I wrote down of the things that got involved. And let's start with the obvious one. The reason that I abandoned Metazoo was because they kept getting involved in crypto stuff. There was a time in the early 2020s, especially during the pandemic, where you could not go 5 minutes without somebody, whispering into your ear about cryptocurrency and stuff like that. And since Metazoo is a game about cryptids, of course, a lot of people were like, cryptids? You mean crypto? Like, there's an exact line from the video I made ages ago. So I actually had no idea who this Aoki guy was. So when Mike mentioned him, I didn't really think much of it. It's like, oh, is he like a musician or something? You know, like Magic as Post Malone. Apparently he's also big into crypto. Here's the thing about cryptocurrency. The people who shill cryptocurrency are notoriously bad at managing money. We keep hearing about like the crypto crashes happening just all over the place. It is entirely a system built on smoke. I know there's going to be a lot of people in my comments complaining about this, and I'm here to tell you they're wrong. Just look at what happened to like so many like crypto things. Like they go in value and then they like immediately flatline. NFTs are a thing. NFTs, they did some NFTs back when it was kind of early. Um, Before like the world at large knew about all of the problems that they cause. And you know, Mike talked to me. I was like, wow, there's been a lot of negative feedback on these NFTs. And I'm like, well, yeah, NFTs are not a good idea. It's recently been revealed like the terrible things they do. The fact that they are causing like the computer parts components prices to skyrocket. The fact that they are using tons of electricity. And by the way, proof of stake doesn't fix the fact that there's still like a lot of like farms and mills and stuff like that, and a lot of malware that turns unsuspecting people's computers into crypto mining facilities. But the thing about what crypto does is, you know, they claim that they're going to make a lot of money with NFTs, and they don't like reinvest it into the business. They talk about the Lamborghinis they're going to buy and stuff like that, and that might come up later. But yeah, they are really bad with money. What they do is they show up to a company, they cause its value to briefly skyrocket, and then they walk away as the whole thing blows up. It just disintegrates, which seems to be a bit of what happened with Metazoo. I'll get into that a bit later. But like I said, the video I made where I basically had the public falling out with them, where I basically gave them an open letter saying, I'm done with you, was when they doubled down on NFTs. Like, they made the NFTs, I thought, I was like, okay, this is going to go away. But then, in the middle of the Axie Infinity scandal, they decided to double down on NFTs. And that struck me as such a boneheaded move that I backed out completely. I sold my collection. I actually had a special arrangement with Metazoo that in exchange for advertising for them, I was given permission to sell my sample product. I am not the kind of person who sells sample product. The only 2 times I've done it were with Metazoo, which again I had permission to do. The only other exception was Flesh and Blood. I sold my copy of the Eye of Ophidia that came in the sample booster box they sent me in order to buy a new computer. So, and as a result, they have, you know, this poster was permanently on my couch during the couch era. It was permanently behind me in commemoration of the fact that they had given that to me. This is actually like a neat poster. They sent it to me with my preview kit, but it has this big space down here where you're supposed to write like tournaments and stuff like that. Like, that's how you're supposed to use these posters, LGSs. You're supposed to laminate them so that you can then write tournament dates on with dry erase marker, and when that's over, you erase it and write it fresh. That's how you're supposed to use these. A lot of people just write on them raw, and that always bothers me because then you can't erase all the dry erase and turn it into something that you can show off at your store. So yeah, messing with crypto was absolutely the biggest mistake Metazoo made, because it brought in the crypto bro culture, which would sort of damage everything else. I mean, another game, speaking of Flesh and Blood, a game that came out and, you know, had sort of a similar boom. They had like the special cards that you could get in the first edition booster packs. They had a lot of hype, and they rode that hype, but they rode that hype by developing a sustainable business model. Metazoo has crashed and burned. Flesh and Blood, from what I've heard, had last year one of its best years ever. Like, they were doing like collaboration special editions with like with other big YouTubers. I know the Tolarian Community College did like a big collab with them, but they made a sustainable business model, and they made a fun game out of it. Like, they actually took like the demo deck sized thing and made it its own tournament setting called Blitz, I believe. But because they focused on creating a fun game that everybody could enjoy, making a sustainable game, they're still around. They, to my indication, have no intention of canceling anything. I mean, they still have their problems with like requiring like legendary equipment to really compete, but at least you only need 1 copy of each of those equipments. It's still a bit bogus that it's hard to compete without the legendary equipment, but moving on. Um, so, one of the ways that these crypto bro things manifested was just because they had blocked me on all social media accounts doesn't mean that I didn't have an alternative email subscribed to them. And like once a week, I was getting an email from Metazoo that was like, hey, get hyped for this new thing. We got new skateboards and stuff like that. Like, they're doing like skateboard decks and all sorts of things. Like some of the stuff, like remember the stuff I proposed before, like the buttons and like the t-shirts that could like generate in-game effects? They weren't doing that. Instead, they were making like skateboards and special promotional items that had like a unique card attached to them. Heaven help you if that card ever becomes competitive. And they were drilling people on these. Like they were constantly putting these out, and it seemed exhausting. Keeping up with Metazoo sounded like one of the most exhausting things ever. But what about the gameplay? I don't know. I never really heard about that. People weren't really talking about the gameplay with Metazoo anymore. It was all about, getting hyped for the next product. It was consume product to get hyped for next product, made manifest in ways I haven't seen since Pokemon. They also made a reserve list. That was also a really dumb thing to do. That is a way that you can say that you're not on the side of the people who actually want to play your game, is making a reserve list. The reserve list, the term comes from Magic the Gathering, where they made a list of cards they promised to never print anymore, and they consider it the worst decision they ever made. It is, in a minor part, why Magic 30th was such an embarrassment. That was dumb. Nobody was really playing the game at that point. I mean, I met a couple people who claimed that they were playing, but there wasn't like a big scene where people show up week after week after week to play. Speaking of, though, of showing up to play, one of the things I heard is they dicked around with their local game stores, the people who carried the games and did the tournaments, and that is something you don't want to do. You want to keep local game stores happy, because they are one of your biggest sources, not necessarily of revenue, but they absolutely are of community support and generating interest. They're running your tournaments for you, and so you want to treat them well. You don't want to be mean to local game stores. Metazoo was mean to local game stores. The first one was in order for stores to continue to get Metazoo organized play support, they would have to buy like 1,200, 1,500, a lot of product like every single month, like way more product than you get for a game that's not a member of the big three. And that was required in order to get organized play support. I did a video about organized play. A lot of people don't understand that organized play is not something that is generated and sent to stores out of the goodness of the company's hearts. It is usually paid. You usually have to buy the organized play kit with the hope that the investment translates into enough sales that you make more money than you otherwise would. If companies do include organized play kits for free, there tends to be some kind of strict thing to it. Like, one thing I suggested is, if people, I'll buy a case of your starter decks, you can turn to them and say, buy 2 cases and I'll throw in an OP kit for free. It's purely a method to try to get games into stores, to maybe occasionally use it as a sales sweetener, but requiring stores to have minimum purchases to stay subscribed to organized play is just a dick move, okay? Because here's the thing, so many people who get engaged in organized play have no idea of the things that go behind the scenes. They don't know that the stores are the ones who have to pay the money in order to get these, so that there's some sort of big conditional thing attached to it. They think that it's like a cool, neato freebie thing. So here's the thing, if it's like, we're not doing Metazoo tournaments anymore, even though people are showing up, and everybody's like, how dare you, rather than, it's like, they were, they wouldn't really take the side of the stores if the stores decided to stop carrying organized play over this. Although that was only one of the things. The other one I heard about was, because here's the thing that makes it so unbelievable that it collapsed just so recently, is because they had a Sanrio tie-in. Sanrio is like the second largest brand in the world behind Pokemon. I think they're past Star Wars as well. it's kind of a perfect little match. You know, you have this fun, quirky, like classic style game, and now we have Sanrio characters in it. It made sense to me. They had Kuromi, who was sort of this spooky character, be sort of the headliner for it, and I was like, you know, that makes sense. Sanrio's kind of big. You know, they've for a second I thought I was like, oh wow, they actually hit it big with something, and it turned out to be a disaster. First of all, like the minimum buy-in for the Sanrio set was like a $150 like monster box set, which on its own wasn't great. To my understanding, they didn't really have a way to dabble in the Sanrio set for a long time. It did not sell very well. I think because it was just way too darned expensive. And people were exhausted from buying stuff because they kept hyping new stuff and putting it out. So I think a lot of it was people were exhausted by it. They did not use this like amazing license opportunity as a way to get more people into the game. This is the kind of thing that you want to put out for an affordable price, so that people can be like, oh, what's this game? Hey, I like these characters. What game are they attached to? That's how you leverage that to get more people to play your game. They didn't do that. They charged $150. It did not sell well. This was after they sold a bunch to local game stores for the price to sell at a premium. That was the expectation, was that they would buy these boxes. They probably spent like $70, $80 on each of these to try to sell them for their SRP of $150, and then undercut them by putting the boxes on ludicrous sale in Black Friday. Again, this is through the grapevine. In fact, let's double check that real quick. Metazoo Black Friday promo pack, $30. So they're well, the booster boxes, they're still trying to they're still the booster boxes, they're still trying to sell them at this higher price point. Even Sanrio is trying to sell them directly, but they're kind of struggling. But yeah, they had Sanrio Kuromi Cryptid Carnival sales break records. But I've heard the fact that they undercut so many people with that Black Friday sale is why so many stores just kind of drop them. But here's the thing. It says sales break records. Is that what I'm reading right here? Is Editor Doc, and I clicked that link. So it's from a website that is kind of biased in favor of Metazoo. Metazoo products you need, fast, safe, reliable. Oh dear. They're talking about breaking records because the box in the month of December sold 1,670 out of a run of 10,000. Metazoo Kuromi news that may trigger you. Oh, gag me. But yeah, they sold 1,670 out of 10,000 boxes. So they made 10,000 boxes and they did not even sell through a fifth of them. This is actually really bad. This is not what somebody would consider to be a triumph by any means. When you only sell 20% of your stock, when you don't even sell, this is 1/6 of all of their stock. When that's the best you can do, you are in trouble. But here's the thing: if they're doing so well, if they were doing so well, this was just a few months ago. This is October. This was 3-4 months ago. That's barely any time in the card game space. That is literally, they literally went from a Hello Kitty tie-in to dead in a single quarter. How do you do that? Well, by having crypto bros who, rather than investing in the company, went out and bought Lamborghinis and fancy houses. So the first real collapse that was brought to my attention after the forced paid subscription to LGS stores was all of the artists bailed. All of them. Metazoo had about a dozen artists, about a baker's dozen of artists and illustrators, if I recall correctly, and they make the cards on commission. What happened was they saw that Metazoo was making all sorts of money, and they said, hey, could we have some of that money? We illustrated the cards and helped make all this possible. And then Metazoo said no, and that's when the artists walked. Although this was at a time soon after Metazoo kind of tipped their hand and revealed that they were, in fact, they didn't have any money anymore. because even though they apparently made $50 million, that money was not properly reinvested back into the brand, into the artists. Mistreating artists is a common thing, and it's why unions form, and it's why people go on strike. This is why unions exist, people, is so that talent that are basically the source of media lifeblood don't get exploited. It still happens anyway, but this is why, you had like the writer strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike, which might get a part 2 Electric Boogaloo, although the strikers might be striking the union at this point. But yeah, the game was apparently making a lot of money. The people were making out like bandits. The artists asked for some and were told no, so they walked. Fair enough. And I met most of these artists. I met a lot of these artists at the New York Comic Con, the one I filmed for Nightfall. So pay your artists, man. If your game is successful, the illustrators who helped make that happen, that should parlay into more work for them that's better paying. It's really a shame that that didn't really happen. Although the evidence that they were hemorrhaging money had to do with something that I warned about with Battle Spirit Saga. Like, Battle Spirit Saga spent most of their marketing hyping up paid tournaments, and like I said, paid tournaments are not how you get a game off the ground. You have to make an appealing game because 90% of all players don't care about paid tournaments at all. I mean, keep in mind that with Yu-Gi-Oh!, from my understanding, most Yu-Gi-Oh! Champions are satisfied by, like, a bit of Little Caesar's pizza. Like, the San Jose tournament I talked about, the grand prize was, like, a jacket and a promo card, to my understanding. I mean, paying players is nice, but you shouldn't be, like, boasting about how you're pouring millions into paid tournaments. Like I said, with Battle Spirit Saga, they were doing that rather than building a brand that everybody felt like they were welcome to join. Appealing just to competitive players is appealing to a microscopic part of your market. Like I said, most of the people who play Pokemon might not even seriously touch like online competitive at all. Most of them just spend their time playing with Pokemon and going around the world. I'm one of those people. I got into competitive briefly in X and Y and then never again. But what they did was they were talking about how they were going to put all this money into like paid tournaments and stuff like that. And then apparently a tournament called Dark Tower happened and the winner never got paid. They never got paid, which technically is possible fraud, because if you run like a paid competition with a stated cash prize, you have to like prove that you have that money beforehand, like have it in escrow or something. Otherwise, you run afoul of possible fraud. It might be one of the reasons that they're pulling the plug is they might be facing fraud charges over not paying out on this major tournament. And these guys had gotten a Sanrio deal that apparently sold fairly well, and they are out of money? They're selling their game in Target and Barnes & Noble, and they're out of money? How do you do that? By having a bunch of crypto bros mismanage your company for you. That's how you do that. It's why I said crypto bad. I'm saying a similar thing about AI bad, because what it does is it alienates your working staff. It alienates your players. It's, like I said, it's an attempt to destroy the medium for profit. It's going to be like Uber. The moment all of the artists and illustrators are out of a job is the moment AI will cost more than any artist ever did. But yeah, that's a disaster. Like I said, dare to compare to Flesh and Blood. Rather than trying to run like a constant hype train, they used hype. Yes, they used special cards like the Eye of Ophidia and stuff like that to help sell these booster boxes with like special rare cards and stuff. But like I said, they parlayed that into a sustainable game because the game itself is still really fun. It was a unique concept when it came out. It was a slobber knocker simulator. You're not summoning minions and hiding behind them for life points. You're literally just repeatedly punching your opponent in the face. The game that got closest to this was UFS, but even they had a very different system for how Flesh and Blood did. Flesh and Blood captured this very in-the-moment kind of vibe, which is what made it so appealing. So, yeah, cautionary tale. Can I call this the 2-year curse? I think I'm going to, because it was smoke. it was held aloft by smoke by the end of its second year. It did not make it to 3. The Kickstarter boxes were launched in March. That is considered the start of it, March of 2021. Or March of, either way, it did not make it to 3. Yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on that. Like I said, I'm not the kind of person who like harvests drama, which is why I'm putting this video out on on my side channels, because I don't really want to be dragged into that too much. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. Good night, everybody.